At the meeting point of the Atlantic Ocean and the Hudson River lies a city built on islands and peninsulas, connected by hundreds of bridges and tunnels. From above, it looks like a puzzle of waterways and land, yet on the ground it feels like the center of the world. Towering skyscrapers rise from Manhattan, while sprawling neighborhoods stretch across rivers and bays, each with its own rhythm of life. This is New York City. This city is often thought of as one giant metropolis, but in reality it is a collection of 5 distinct boroughs, each with its own history, culture, and identity. This unique structure, formed during the city's consolidation in 1898, transformed separate counties into a single urban powerhouse, while still allowing local character to thrive. Understanding why New York was divided this way reveals not only the city's complex past, but also how governance, infrastructure, and community pride continue to shape one of the world's most influential cities. So, why exactly is New York split into boroughs? Let's dive into the story. And before we get started, tell me in the comments, if you had to choose one borough to live in, which number would you pick? 1898 Consolidation of New York City. Before 1898, what we now call New York City was not a single unified metropolis, but a collection of separate cities, towns, and counties, each with its own identity and government. Manhattan, then known as New York County, was already the economic and political center, home to Wall Street, the busy port, and a rapidly growing population fueled by waves of immigration. To the north, the Bronx was originally part of Westchester County, until portions of it were annexed to New York City in the late 19th century, reflecting the city's gradual expansion. Across the East River, Brooklyn was a completely independent city, and by the 1890s, it had become the 4th largest city in the United States with more than 1 million residents. It had its own government, cultural institutions, and a strong sense of local pride. Queens, on the other hand, was largely rural, consisting of farms, small villages, and developing towns. It covered a much larger area than today, but only the western portion was eventually included in the consolidation, while the eastern towns split off to form Nassau County in 1899. Finally, Staten Island, then called Richmond County, was sparsely populated, known for its small towns, natural landscapes, and ferry connections to Manhattan. During the late 19th century, the rapid growth of industry, commerce, and immigration created intense pressure for better infrastructure, transportation, and governance. Separate governments meant fragmented decision-making, especially in areas like water supply, transit systems, policing, and public health. The construction of the Brooklyn Bridge demonstrated the potential of linking communities together, and civic leaders began pushing for a unified city that could compete on a global scale. This vision became reality on the 1st of January, 1898, when the New York State Legislature approved the consolidation of Greater New York. Overnight, the population more than doubled to over 3.4 million, making New York by far the largest city in the United States. Boroughs equals counties system. In New York City, the 5 boroughs are not just ordinary districts. They are also counties under New York state law, creating a structure that is unique in the United States. Each borough has a direct one-to-one relationship with a county. The Bronx is Bronx County, Brooklyn is Kings County, Manhattan is New York County, Queens is Queens County, and Staten Island is Richmond County. This arrangement dates back to the consolidation of 1898, when the separate cities and counties of the region were merged into a single entity known as the City of Greater New York. Instead of dissolving the counties, the state allowed them to retain their legal status, while the city introduced the new concept of boroughs to integrate these areas into one municipal system. The result is a dual identity. On the one hand, the 5 boroughs act as administrative subdivisions of the city, each with a borough president and a strong sense of community identity. On the other hand, they remain counties for state and federal purposes, which means they have their own courts, district attorneys, and legal jurisdictions. For example, criminal trials, property deeds, and certain official records are all handled at the county level, even though the city as a whole is governed by a single mayor and city council. This system reflects both the practical and political compromises of the late 19th century. At the time of consolidation, places like Brooklyn were proud independent cities, and local leaders feared losing their identity if absorbed entirely into Manhattan's orbit. By keeping the county framework intact and layering the borough structure on top, New York was able to unify governance while preserving a degree of local autonomy and recognition. More than a century later, the boroughs equals counties model continues to shape the way New Yorkers think about their city, both as a single, global metropolis and as a mosaic of 5 distinct communities, each with its own history, culture, and role in the life of the city. Reasons why New York City was organized into boroughs. When New York City was consolidated in 1898, one of the greatest challenges facing city leaders was how to create a unified system of governance without erasing the unique identities of the communities being brought together. Manhattan, already the nation's financial and cultural hub, dominated in terms of commerce and population density. Brooklyn, however, was not a mere suburb, but a thriving city in its own right, the 4th largest in the United States at the time, boasting its own government, cultural institutions, and more than 1 million residents. Queens was still largely rural, dotted with farmland and small villages, while Staten Island maintained a quieter, more isolated character. The Bronx, originally part of Westchester County, had only recently been annexed to New York and was still developing its identity. City planners and state lawmakers recognized that simply absorbing these communities into a single, centralized government based in Manhattan risked alienating residents and erasing their sense of autonomy. Brooklyn, in particular, resisted the idea of being overshadowed by Manhattan's dominance. To address these concerns, the borough system was introduced as a political compromise and an administrative innovation. Each of the 5 boroughs was directly aligned with an existing county, thus preserving the legal and judicial frameworks of counties, including courts, district attorneys, and county-level administration. At the same time, the creation of the office of borough president gave each borough a political leader who could represent local interests and ensure that no single community was left voiceless within the larger city. This structure provided reassurance to residents that their neighborhoods and traditions would not be erased, even as they became part of a greater whole. Importantly, the borough system also made governance practical for a city that more than doubled in size overnight, growing to over 3.4 million people. By decentralizing some responsibilities while maintaining a unified citywide government, New York could better coordinate infrastructure projects, transportation networks, and public services while still allowing for local representation. Role of borough presidents. The creation of borough presidents gave each borough a political figure who could represent local interests while participating in citywide decision-making. In the early decades of Greater New York, borough presidents wielded substantial power. Their most important influence came through the Board of Estimate, a powerful governing body made up of the mayor, the comptroller, the city council president, and the 5 borough presidents. The Board of Estimate controlled the city's budget, land use policies, franchise approvals, and capital projects, meaning that borough presidents directly shaped how resources were distributed and how the city grew. Importantly, the board gave equal representation to each borough, regardless of population size. This meant that Staten Island, with fewer than 200,000 residents, had the same formal voting power as Brooklyn, with more than 2 million residents, a system designed to protect smaller boroughs from being overshadowed by Manhattan and Brooklyn. However, this structure was challenged as the city grew. By the late 20th century, critics argued that equal representation for unequal populations violated democratic principles. In 1989, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the board structure violated the constitutional principle of one person, one vote. As a result, the Board of Estimate was abolished, and most of its powers were transferred to the City Council, which allocates seats based on population. This decision effectively stripped borough presidents of their formal legislative and budgetary authority. Since then, the role of borough presidents has become largely representative and advisory. They no longer directly control citywide budgets or policies, but they continue to influence local governance in several ways. While their direct authority has diminished compared to the first half of the 20th century, they remain important figures in maintaining the political balance of New York City. They provide a channel for residents to voice local concerns, preserve the distinct identity of each borough, and ensure that even in a city of more than 8 million people, community-level issues are not lost within the scale of centralized governance. Transportation and connections between New York City's boroughs. One of the most pressing challenges after the 1898 consolidation of Greater New York was how to physically unite 5 boroughs that were separated by rivers, bays, and straits into a single, functioning city. At the end of the 19th century, most of the boroughs were connected only by ferries, and traveling between Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and Staten Island was slow and unreliable. The Brooklyn Bridge, completed in 1883, had already demonstrated the potential of large-scale infrastructure to tie communities together, turning Brooklyn from an independent city into a true extension of Manhattan's economic life. In the years that followed, the city embarked on an ambitious program of construction that transformed its geography. The Williamsburg Bridge, the Manhattan Bridge, and the Queensboro Bridge created vital new corridors between Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens, while the Triborough Bridge linked Manhattan, Queens, and the Bronx in a single span, symbolizing the city's interdependence. At the same time, the launch of the New York City subway in 1904 revolutionized commuting by providing fast, affordable underground and elevated rail links across boroughs. The Interborough Rapid Transit, Brooklyn-Manhattan Transit, and later the independent subway system gradually expanded into a unified network, binding neighborhoods together and making it possible for people to live in one borough while working in another. This mass transit system not only supported the growth of the city's economy, but also shaped the social fabric, creating a sense of shared identity among millions of residents. Staten Island remained the most geographically isolated, separated from the rest of the city by New York Harbor. Its connection to Manhattan was sustained by the Staten Island Ferry, which became both a practical lifeline and an enduring symbol of the city. Later, the construction of the Verrazano Narrows Bridge in 1964 finally linked Staten Island by road to Brooklyn, integrating it more closely into the metropolitan transportation grid. Meanwhile, a system of tunnels, such as the Holland Tunnel and the Lincoln Tunnel, created direct links for vehicles between Manhattan and New Jersey, expanding the reach of the city's economy beyond its boroughs. Together, these bridges, tunnels, ferries, and subways turned what had once been separate cities and counties into an interconnected metropolis. While each borough retained its own character and identity, the transportation network allowed them to function as one city, enabling the flow of people, goods, and ideas across the entire region. In this way, infrastructure became not only the backbone of New York's physical growth, but also the glue that held together its five-borough identity. The story of New York's five boroughs is ultimately a story of balance between unity and individuality, between citywide progress and local pride. The 1,898 Consolidation created one of the world's most dynamic metropolises, but it was the borough system that made it possible for such a vast and diverse place to function while honoring the histories of its communities. From bridges and subways that physically connected the boroughs, to the offices of borough presidents that ensured representation, the system continues to reflect New York's unique character, a city that is both one and many. Today, more than a century later, the boroughs remain not just administrative divisions, but living reminders that New York's strength comes from the identities of its parts, woven together into a single, extraordinary whole.